So if I may jump in, the thing I will say that I will let my colleague Dr. Park talk about the military aspect, but it seems to me from the realist perspective, that what is clear from the Russian, from Putin, is that if I don't believe that Vladimir Putin wants to occupy Ukraine, because this is not feasible. It will require too much. It's a country that's twice the size of France, 44 million people. It will be a logistical nightmare. What I do believe is that the objective, at least one of the objectives, is to make Ukraine a non-functional state, so that it cannot be a threat to Russian interests, and you can see that in Georgia, what happened with the war in Georgia, So as long as because, while I do agree with, Mrs. Kozenchuk, when she talked about all those, the thing that is it's a complex case, because you have a history, it's not just, NATO, as she mentioned, there's cultural, if you think about Eastern Russia, there's so many issues wrapped up, between the Russian and the Ukrainian. But there's one question that is clear from the security perspective. If you're the Russian, you attack, because you said that you don't want Ukraine to be part of NATO. So if you can have it, you can occupy it because your logistical nightmare. What you want to make sure is that, it's not a threat. And so you will make it a non-functional state, which I don't think is a good, but I think, short of occupying it, that's the only thing you can really do in terms of making sure, because if you say that that's the main problem, that the problem is to have a state that is aligned with the European Union, aligned with NATO, and you see as a security threat, obviously what you want to make sure that, this state, if you can occupy it, because of, it's going to be a logistical nightmare, as I said, you want to render it non-functional so that it's not a threat to you. So I think partly I can see that as one of the main objectives, but I don't believe, I hear a lot of people saying that he wants to occupy, and I don't think it's going to be the case, because it's just going to be a nightmare. He might do it, but it's going to be a nightmare. Twice the size of France, 44 million people in the 21st century. That's going to be difficult.
Well, I agree. I agree with Dr. Ofoulhast. And I think that there are several objectives that Russia is trying to basically achieve. First, either to make Ukraine, a state without a government, a state that will be in a permanent state of chaos. So not a functioning state. That's one objective. He would be very pleased to have a government in Ukraine to support or to side with Russia. But, let me start from the beginning. Well, there are several objectives first. The optimal solution with the case of Ukraine would be to make Ukraine a pro-Russian state. It is not possible. Okay, so in this case, he would be satisfied with having a neutral Ukraine. Second, he would like to have those separatist regions. So Crimea and Donbass and those other, pro-Russian, separatist areas. And third, he wants to demilitarize Ukraine. So basically, in his view, in Vladimir Putin's view, is that Ukraine needs to be either a pro-Russian state or a demilitarized state that is neutral, to act as a buffer zone between Russia and NATO. In addition, you'll be very pleased to have those, separatist regions annexed, like, Crimea. So this is, in my opinion, the main objective of Vladimir Putin. And I think, based on what I see, I think that it is going to happen. I don't see any way out. The US and the West cannot intervene in Ukraine. So the Ukrainians are left alone. They will be alone, and they won't be able to resist that powerful Russian machine for long. So the end result would be that the government of Ukraine will fall, and Russia will demand either a pro-Russian government or a neutral government. In addition, they will basically claim those separatist regions. So that would be the solution for Russia. And again, I repeat, in my view, that would be the only solution, because the West cannot have an impact, a direct impact on that war, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, so what I meant is that, well, I do agree with Dr. Park. So he could have simply used, surgery strikes to force Ukraine not to take any action to join NATO and the EU. That would be enough in that case. However, in my opinion, the reason why he is going with a full invasion, but not with a conquest, is that he wants, in addition to having a neutral or a pro-Russian government in Ukraine, he also wants those separatist regions annexed. So that's, in my opinion, the reason, because now he has a justification. Now we are going to negotiate. Okay, we're going to negotiate. I want an impartial or neutral government in Kiev, and also I want these separatist, regions, and that's it. So now he has a full justification, because there is, U.S. army, the Russian army all over Ukraine. So he can make that claim now.
Thank you, Dr. Prifti. Let me go ahead and ask one more question here that has to do with foreign policy now, especially from the U.S. perspective. So let me ask the panelists to what are their views in terms of what are the role of the United States in NATO at this point. So now we're dealing with war in Europe, and what should we do? What should be the position of the United States? I know that the U.S. and some European countries already took action in terms of economic sanctions. We could talk about if economic sanctions are effective. They seem to be actually working at this point, but for how long? But I want to hear from the panelists in terms of what should we do? The United States and also the Europeans, and more specifically NATO. What are your views on that?
My view is very simple, and I mentioned it before. We need to stop the war. We need to stop sending weapons to Ukraine and importing oil from Russia. We need to negotiate a deal with Russia. And that negotiation, the outcome will favor Russia. There is no other way out. So we need to negotiate. We need to stop funding this war. We need to stop prolonging this war, because more and more civilians are going to die if we do that. And we are well aware of that, because what we're doing when we send weapons to Ukraine, we are telling them, kill as many Russians as possible. And we understand also that we have this huge Russian war machine. It will not stop. So we know that if we continue this war, thousands and thousands more civilians are going to die. So we need to stop that. We need to stop that and to start negotiations as soon as possible. And I believe at the end, unfortunately, this is, great power politics. The outcome is going to favor Russia. But we need to stop, funding the war, sending weapons to Ukraine and importing, oil from Russia. That's just is prolonging that war, is causing more and more deaths in that region. That's very sad. I understand, because I see even in this discussion, we have nationality here. I see that, national, fervent, how you feel about it when you are Russian and when you are Ukrainian. I see that. I can tell that. I'm surprised by that. But I see how nationalism, especially if you add more fuel, more weapons from outside, nationalism is something that leads to irrational actions. Irrational actions means killing each other, because you have a nationalist, feeling dominating Ukraine and Russia right now. And I see it here as well. Okay?
Final thoughts, 10 seconds,
Yes,
go ahead.
Yes, what Russia is doing in Ukraine is bad. What we have been doing to Ukraine is worse. And the countries that are sending weapons to Ukraine are simply, Dr. Rivera, you may, if you mute it, it won't have an echo. So what we are doing there is worse. And I believe that nations are rational actors. We know what we are doing. They know what they are doing. By sending weapons to the Ukrainian people, they are telling them, now get these weapons and fight the Russians, kill as many as possible. But they really know also that the Russian war machine, will basically is so powerful that it is going to cause thousands of casualties among the Ukrainians. So we are well aware of that. So everybody knows that when we send weapons. But I'm afraid that this has turned into a bait and bleed war, meaning that understanding the power of the Russian war machine and understanding how Ukrainians now are so willing to fight against them, understanding the feeling of nationalism, we are using that as a bait and bleed. We baited Ukraine to bleed Russia. So we need to understand this. And all those nations that are sending weapons to Ukraine, they know that. They are baiting Ukraine to bleed Russia. This is very dangerous. This is very ugly. And that must stop. We know that. We must stop that. So it's very ugly because it's bait and bleed, the worst form of the worst strategy in international relations. Because in this case, you fund both sides, you provide assistance to both sides so that they can bleed each other white. That's what we are doing there. We need to stop it, and we need to start negotiations, understanding that they are going to favor Russia. But it is worth doing that in order to save thousands and thousands of Ukrainian lives, or innocent lives indeed. And I think that the end result of this is going to be a new neutral government of Ukraine.
Yeah.
We are going to see separatist regions, those two regions going to Russia, and there will be an agreement between Russia and the West to rebuild Ukraine as a neutral buffer state. So I think that I view that as being, inevitable, but nothing is 100% sure this time. But thank you so very much for this discussion tonight. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prifti. Dr. Ofoulhast, quick final thoughts.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that, in terms of energy market, it makes sense now because we're already paying, $3.50 per gallon. And so Russia is about 10-12% of the output in terms of the world oil market. So if you sanction that sector, it's going to push the price up, and you already see that the oil barrel is at 110, so it kind of makes sense in that sense that the sanction are not applied to that particular sector. The second thing, and most important, that if I were, especially for the students who are here, I wouldn't too much pay attention to what is being said, publicly, because they know the Russian, the Ukrainian, the US, the European know that they will have to make a deal. The question is, what are they willing to give each party to get to an outcome to have a stable continent, European continent? A deal will be made. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually they will find some kind of agreement. And it's just, you have to give guarantees to the Russians. The Russians have to give guarantees to the European, to the Ukrainian. If they are able, whichever guarantee they find, if they are able to do that, that conflict will go away. The enmity might not go away, but the conflict will go away. If they can resolve that, this is just phase one of something that will be with us for the foreseeable future, because at the end of the day, international relations are clear. Countries will fight to defend what they consider as their core interests. Whether one agrees with those interests or not is irrelevant. The countries are willing to fight to defend what they consider as their core interests, unfortunately. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Ofoulhast. Dr.